Hi there, this is Chris Scullion from TitleHack.com, and this is the second of my VHS preservation project tapes. This is Donkey Kong Country video. It was released both in the UK and the US. This is the UK version. The US version was called Donkey Kong Country Exposed, and I believe it was sent out to Nintendo Power Readers. This is the UK version, which has a few differences. For the most part, the vast majority of the video is the same as the US one, but there's a couple of changes, most notably at the end. The US version had a kind of teaser for Killer Instinct, which was taken out of this one, and this one, although both tapes had the Donkey Kong documentary kind of ended at about 12-13 minutes, this one goes on for another 5 minutes with like UK TV commercials, which should be of note. So that bit, at least if you're an American viewer, that bit at least will be new to you, even if the rest of this isn't. So hopefully you stick around to that and see what you think. There's a chap called Josh Wolf. He's a comedian. He's mostly a stand-up comedian, but in his kind of younger years he became a spokesman for Nintendo and later Microsoft. This is Ken Lobb. He is a long-time programmer. One of his early games was Low G Man on the NES, which is one of my favourite kind of forgotten games. Ken Lobb became like a kind of cult hero among other developers to the extent that the Klob gun in GoldenEye is named after him. So anytime, it's a shame because it's not a very good gun, but the Klob, as in K-L-O-B-B, is based on Ken Lobb. This Josh Wolf guy, you might not have seen much of him if you're UK based, or indeed if you're US based. In Britain, the only time you maybe would have seen him is he was in a few episodes of My Name is Earl back in the day. But other than that, he's not really had much. He's presented some Shark Week stuff in the US and stuff like that, but in the UK he's pretty much unknown.
This is Dan. Oh, Dan! What's up? How are you?
This is here Mr. Wolf is meeting the Nintendo Treehouse, which still exists to this day, but this is when it first kind of started. Essentially the Nintendo Treehouse was an attempt by Nintendo of America to set up a department that did a better job of translating and localizing games for an English audience, because up until this point a lot of games were just kind of had a generic translation job, and it was a case of they'd be translated and occasionally there would be kind of bad translation, and because a lot of it was just direct word for word translation, it didn't really work so well. So the Treehouse was the first attempt to kind of put together a team that would do proper localization but also QA test games and stuff like that, and that's where so this is the first kind of Donkey Kong Country was the first big game the Treehouse worked on, and that's why they're called the Treehouse, because Donkey Kong obviously has a treehouse at the start of the game.
Tony, did you have a favorite character? Are there more characters in this?
So yeah, the treehouse, Play It Loud, that was on that guy's t-shirt, was the kind of Nintendo's weird kind of hip kids campaign in the early 90s, where it was basically trying to appeal to children and their rebellious nature, because they used to come up with kind of really weird it had a load of TV commercials in the US for really weird adverts saying stuff like what was it, give the world a wedgie and stuff like that. Basically trying to be with it and cool and hip. And they brought out like a music CD at one point, Nintendo Power did, called Play It Loud soundtrack or something like that. So yeah, that's Play It Loud. These are QA testers that are testing the game.
Have to play each area probably 100, 200 times each, weeding out all the bugs. This is a prototype board. There's 8 chips on
the prototype
this,
cartridge. So yeah, this is the Treehouse. Like I said, the Treehouse continues to this day. When you see an E3 presentation by Nintendo, and it's followed by a couple of days of streaming of Treehouse Live, Direct, stuff like that, that's what the Treehouse has become. That's still the same department, but just that's what they're up to these days. So this is where it all began, Donkey Kong Country, and to this day they still do lots of fantastic localization and QA work, which is great. That's why a lot of Nintendo first party games have fantastic translation, and in more recent years UK translation has been brilliant as well. Like a lot of first party Nintendo games have, especially the RPG side of things, have translations that you may not realise that there are UK translations as well as US translations and North American translations. So For example, Miitomo, which was recently released. Miitopia, which was recently released, the RPG game starring Mii characters. When you're in a battle and you want to escape, the escape button in the UK version says leg it, as opposed to like just run away. That's a kind of British term.
As to how you made them look so real.
So he's on the phone now to Tim Stamper at Rare. Tim Stamper was one of the two Stamper brothers who kind of came up with Rare, who were previously known as Ultimate Play the Game. The Stampers were, Tim did the kind of graphic side of things, and Chris Stamper did the programming side of things. Yeah, so this is the kind of, it's interesting watching this now because this is the very, very early days of CGI graphics. It's interesting having later on when he talks about how do you get the roundness, because they don't really know, the CGI wasn't really a term back then, or certainly not a well-known term. So it's interesting, this bit here when he says how do you make it look so round. It's the only way they could really describe what's essentially a pre-rendered CGI character.
Basically, picture 20 supercomputers in a box.
Now, with all this technology, am I going to have to buy an adapter for my home Nintendo?
Not at all. In fact, when the game was created,
that was a sneaky dig at Sega, because at the time Sega were bringing out a 32X adapter and also kind of hyping up the Sega CD, or known as the Mega CD here.
The roundness, the 3D.
The whole point of partly of this video, and you'll see it at the end, was them making a big deal of the fact that you don't need a 32X for this, and you don't need a Mega CD or a Sega CD. This would all work on Super Nintendo hardware.
Basically, what you can do with it is.
So yeah, how they made Donkey Kong, as he explains here, is that they made these pre-rendered CGI characters using really powerful Silicon graphics workstations, and then basically captured them frame by frame, almost like the same way they did Mortal Kombat, where they digitized characters. So they would make individual animation frames, and then just essentially make those 2D sprites. So it's the same as a normal 2D platformer, it's just that the sprites that were imported, instead of being hand-drawn, pixel-drawn graphics, they just imported these CGI sprites instead.
No problem.
Great.
Okay, well, this is the first level, and this is Donkey Kong's treehouse, and that's where we got our name from. And there's a banana arrow on top of the trees when you first start. Donkey Kong can drop down there, and he can knock the keg out of the floor.
Of course, Donkey Kong Country is one of the 21 games that's going to be featured on the SNES Mini, which is out later this week, actually, at the time of recording this. I've been playing it for a while. I'll have a review up on my site later this week. It's still embargoed. But if you've got the NES Mini, if you're lucky enough to be able to get one of those, you should kind of roughly know what to expect at this point. It's a similar situation.
One part here is a series of barrels, and if you can navigate it properly, almost perfect and not miss.
It also spawned two sequels, obviously. You had Donkey Kong Country 2 and Donkey Kong Country 3. Neither of those are on the SNES Mini, which is a bit of a shame, because they're just as good as this one, probably.
It's tough. You gotta get it down perfect. And
wow, so you got a bunch of free men. Let's go talk to Isaac. This is Isaac. Isaac, say hello.
Hello.
Isaac, I was wondering maybe you could show us a couple more pointers. Possible?
Yeah, I can do that. No problem.
These guys are great.
All right.
What do we got?
These guys are great, but they're...
More snow here.
Okay.
Yeah, it's by all accounts, I've never done QA testing, but by all accounts, it's not the most fun job in the world. Even though this and the Super Mario All Stars video talking to the hotliners make a big deal out of the fact that these guys play games all day and get paid for it. By all accounts, they have to do the same sections over and over and over and over again to try and find bugs, and it essentially sucks all the fun out of it.
Yeah, the far right.
Oh, you're very good.
So yeah. And apparently, you don't get paid a hell of a lot for what it is, but...
So
yeah.
It involves our little friend Diddy.
Diddy.
Yeah, Diddy's the cool guy. You walk over to this little thing here, you jump on top of it, you're gonna grab that rope, let the rope take you over, jump right
We'll be paying
on top
attention
of
to these
that
top
little
tips,
stump,
because
pick
obviously
up the
they'll all
TNT,
still be in the
walk
SNES
over to
Mini
this
version
one,
as well,
blow
so
it up and fall right into it.
very useful.
Now what you want to do in this bonus level is jump out of this canister here, out of this little can, and grab the balloon.
So we have some pointers now. Good thing you came with us, because you learned some things today that, boy, you're not going to learn just anywhere else. You thought it was going to be a waste of your time, didn't you?
Fried green bananas, bananas au gratin. Video game music should draw you into the game. In Donkey Kong Country, we had graphics that were way beyond anything else that's ever been done. We were also hoping to get some music better than anything that's ever been done. This music, for example, is very upbeat, fits with the jungle. It's an early level. The level's not very hard. The music is kind of nice. Okay, now here we have the music that goes with the
It's interesting, the main theme for kind of first level theme from Donkey Kong Country There's actually 3 themes in one. There's 3 different demo.
Because the music is so good, we're putting this
You've
music
really
on
had
CD.
Ken Lobbs clearly annoyed by him here.
Something that's big in Japan for many, many years is game music on
It's
CD.
like you're not listening to
Hasn't
me.
been a big hit in America 'cause maybe music hasn't been quite
Yeah, it was
enough.
originally there was 3 demo themes made
On the
for the
radio,
first
everyday time, you're gonna listen to
level. And rather than decide which of the 3 to do, they actually combined the 3 of them at once. So when you listen to the Donkey Kong Country, the theme from the first level, you can actually hear specifically where the 3 themes kind of merge into each other. So it's a really complex theme, but that's because it's actually 3 tunes in one.
And these rock guys are just kind of rolled up. When you hit this light, they unroll and they start walking towards you. It's so cool. And it's really...
And you gotta switch them on and off.
Sounds a little scary.
Yeah, On Guard's the fisher ride, and he just kind of pokes you with his swordfish front. And
Pokes the bad guys.
yeah,
No,
yeah.
do you guys get to ride? Do we get to ride minecart?
Oh yeah.
The minecart was a favorite stage.
That's your favorite stage?
Yeah, it's a pretty cool stage.
You're mining.
It was the infamous Donkey Kong Country minecart stage that a lot of people had problems with because it's pretty full on.
When we put this out, what do you think? What do you think your friends are gonna think about this game?
Well, I don't think really you have to tell them all that much. Once they see the pictures, it's just gonna be like, you have to have it, you know it, get it.
It's one of those games you don't get bored with. You know, I've played it probably 100 times, over 100 times now, and I'm still getting better. I'm still getting better in stages. There's certain stages I can improve on and keep getting better.
Tell you what, you better reserve this game before November 21st, because that's when it comes out in the stores. I already got mine.
So here's your advert having a dig at Sega again, the 32X and the Sega CD / there you go. And Mega CD, not on 32X. It's pretty bold, it's not very subtle. But there you go, that's how they did it. This was kind of back in the early 90s where Sega and Nintendo had quite the rivalry going on, and it got pretty heated at times with Sega producing some adverts that kind of nowadays wouldn't really be considered acceptable. I'm sure there was one where there was a print ad that had a dog sitting with a Game Boy and a Game Gear saying this dog prefers the Game Boy, but then again this dog is colourblind and it has a low IQ or something like that, and you're thinking, oh, okay. So yeah, so at this point the kind of US VHS showed a really brief kind of clip of Josh Wolf going into a secret room and finding a really early version of Killer Instinct and getting thrown out. It's like a 10-second thing. This is the UK version instead, has another like 4 or 5 minutes of UK TV commercials, including this one for the Super Game Boy, which essentially, for those too young to remember, the Super Game Boy was a SNES cartridge that had a slot for Game Boy cartridges. And you could plug, some Game Boy games were Super Game Boy Enhanced, which meant when you plugged them in they got colour like that, because this is before the Game Boy Color, and yeah, you would get different borders, as you can see here, like around the screen, and yeah, improved sound as well. So Donkey Kong, the remake of Donkey Kong, which they made for the Game Boy, which is one of the best games on the Game Boy actually, because it's an amazing kind of upgrade. This one, when Pauline gets captured at the start on the Game Boy, if you play it on the Game Boy, all you hear is when she gets captured, but when you do it through the Super Game Boy, you hear her going help, help. So it's like kind of improved sound. Not every game, I mean every old Game Boy game was supported on the Super Game Boy, but the older ones were only to an extent, because the Game Boy is still, although it's black and white, so to speak, kind of monochrome, it's still 4 shades of kind of off green. So when you put an old Game Boy game in the Super Game Boy, you could still change those 4 shades to totally different colours if you wanted. So you had your own kind of colour palettes, custom colour palettes that you could create to make the games whatever colour you wanted. So yeah, it still made for some. You couldn't really properly do it. So say you're playing Super Mario Land, you couldn't make Mario's outfit red and make the grass green and the sky blue and all that, because you're only playing with 4 colours, but you can still get something interesting going. There you go, Super Game Boy was 70. Oh, sorry, tell a lie. The SNES was £70 at this point, and the Super Game Boy is $49.99.
Before Nintendo
came out with Super Metroid, we wanted to make sure it was the most intense.
Also, the US got some, the UK got some US adverts as well, like the Super Metroid one. They just got them a bit later and obviously tweaked to have the UK prices at the bottom. So American gamers might remember this commercial because it was shown, except obviously this game around £50 thing at the bottom.
Let's see how we did. Ship it! Super Metroid, only on the Super NES.
Same deal with this Stunt Race FX one, which is also a US commercial first as well. Stunt Race FX was an interesting attempt at using the Super FX chip that was used for Star Fox. And yeah, tried to make a racing game out of it. It was an interesting experiment, but I'm not really sure whether it was considered a big success. It was okay, but at the time you had stuff like Virtua Racing on Sega's side of things, kind of showing that, yeah, it could be done better. This is Brian the Brain. These are a kind of weird series of British adverts. Despite the American accent, it was British adverts. They weren't very funny, so they only did like 4 or 5 of them. And then that was it. They kind of cancelled Brian the Brain. But yeah, at this point the Game Boy was under £40. Which is interesting because it meant the Super Game Boy was actually more expensive than the Game Boy at this point.
Man, this Tetris 2 is giving me a headache. And I don't even have a head. Hey, you want to know what I do when I get bored waiting for my girlfriend to decide what to wear before we go out?
Not too frumpy.
This was just terrible. It was so 90s. So early 90s, these adverts, and they were just really bad. But anyway, yeah, this is coming up to the end of the video anyway, so hopefully you enjoyed this. There'll be more on the way. If you haven't already seen the first upload, which was the Super Mario All-Stars video, check out my YouTube channel. There are more to come. At some point I'm going to be doing a shout out for people who have their own VHS tapes. I'm trying to capture and preserve as many of these as possible at this quality. I think it's really important to have old videos like this preserved. So yeah, at some point I'll be shouting out for donations and stuff like that, so keep an eye out for that if you've got any tapes like this. But until then, keep subscribed to this channel if you want to see some more, and yeah, more to come. Thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed this. I know I certainly did. Thanks guys, bye bye.